Hey there, this is Ill Factor, and in this breakdown video, I'm walking you through a song titled No Heart to Love. It's featuring Ryan Marshall from the group Walk Off the Earth. Now, what's really cool about this track, it's got an up-tempo swing to it and really highlighting a human element to the whole project. And so, without further ado, let's dive right in. So let me play you a little bit of the chorus and I'll walk you through the process of creating this project. So it's really fun. It's got a really cool attitude to this. And so this project really begins at the drums, and that's the main focal point here, and that's where I started to begin the process of creating this song. And so let's just take a look at the first drum kit that we have here. Now, one of the main things about this drum kit is the feel. And when you listen to the chorus, the drums and the groove, the overall pocket, and what I mean by that is just the timing of the drums are a bit loose, and they're not really stiff and rigid, and they've got this nice little swing to it, right? So that is all coming into play with the way I'm quantizing and the way things are lined up according to the grid. And what I mean by the grid is the actual timing and the placement of the notes in response to the tempo, the overall tempo of this project. So let's take a look here. And what I'm going to do is, in this section, let's just solo the drums. And you can see that we've got this kick not really on. And if it was to snap to the nearest grid marker, would be right here. And I've also got the snare just a little behind the beat. And so what I would do is I would normally just originally what I triggered this on my Ableton Push or a drum pad or even my MIDI controller. If you're sequencing and you're using a MIDI controller, you can do the same thing. I would sequence, and then when it comes time to quantizing, meaning to automatically let each of the notes played snap to the nearest grid marking so that it would be in time. Now the secret here is when I select all of these drum patterns, I'm going to go ahead and choose quantize settings. And I'm going to choose 1/16, meaning I want you to move these notes to the nearest 16th note of the bar of the beat. But the secret is really right here in the amount. I have it set to about 39%. So what that means is if I set it to 100%, that gives me that more stiff, robotic, perfect on the grid. I never, this is like the straight, narrow kind of thing, right? So it's very strict, very stiff. But 39% gets a little more humanized. It's more loose, and that's where you see a lot of those drum hits not perfectly lining up to the grid. And then I even got the snare over here a little bit ahead, and so you can go in and just nudge certain notes and certain key instruments and just slightly nudge them over. So what you can do is just quantize certain parts of your rhythm and then purposely go in there with the purpose of just adding some life and loose vibe to it. You can click that, and by holding the command key, the grid will disable, and you can just nudge things just slightly over. Now you want to find the right balance between good feel or this guy just sounds drunk and he doesn't know how to actually play in time. So that's the vibe here. Is what we're trying to do is create feel, not misplacement of rhythm. And we've got that nice cowbell just kind of accenting the kick here. So let me just click this on, right? And that's a cool little percussion thing to have to announce. And it's almost like a little pickup note right before that kick. Look how far off that kick is from the grid. So just to give you an example, let's go ahead and quantize all this and leave it to 100% so that everything is right on the money and stiff. And you'll hear the big difference. So let's go to our quantize settings and set this to 100%. And now hit OK. the life was just stolen away from this beat. It was really just taken away. So let's undo that. I'll play it one more time. Now, right? And almost you feel it immediately with the looseness and shifting things over a little bit so that they're not directly on the grid. You get that nice little head bobbing happening, and that's what I'm after here. That's really at the core foundation of really bringing life to your drum sequences or any drum programming for that matter. So being able to just whether you're manually manipulating the notes so that they're not perfectly on grid, you're adding that human element back into this world that can easily perfectly be this robotic, stiff sounding output. So you want to bring that human element when you're trying to get that vibe and that feel across, especially with your drum programming. All right, so once we have that, a little bit of the processing is just adding some overdrive to give some bite and crunch. Now, a lot of times what I'd like to do is add effects onto the drums while I'm kind of in the creative mode, while I'm actually creating the drum beat, because the texture of the sound could really help shape where I want to go and motivate me to go towards a specific direction. So without the overdrive, it's just really weak. So putting it back on. And there's also a little bit of slapback delay. And what I'm doing is I didn't put it directly onto the drums in case I wanted to use it with some other element in the project. I'm using a send here in Ableton Live so that I'm sending that audio from the drums. I'm sending a little bit over to the return track C. Okay, so the return track C here, and the way it works is you're sending audio so that it can return to you with an effect or something, you know, with something else processing it. So we're sending, or you don't necessarily have to have something, you can send a bunch of stuff to a return track here, but I'm sending the drums, a little bit of that, to C over here. And what I have on C is a repeater. This is a tape delay plugin, and just using a little bit of slapback here. So I'm manually, I took it off sync so that it's not locked into the time or the tempo of the project, and I'm manually just dialing in. And the secret here is to make sure that the left and right are slightly different in delay time. So let's listen to it without the delay. Now with it, you can really hear it on that rim knock. And so it widens it up and it actually adds more vibe to it. So that's something I wanted to do. Now I had that on there while I was just kind of tinkering around with the drum patches and the drum sounds, and that's what really inspired me to create that rhythm to begin with, because of the sounds and the texture. So now what I do is I'm shaving off the low end here. I'm using this EQ to just trim away a lot of that low end. And I'm going to use another drum kit here, and this one simply just has another drum kit loaded with some of my personal library sounds, and I'm just going to beef up the bottom end with bringing in the kick. So what I did was I just simply copied this pattern to a track below, and I eliminated everything except the kick. And well, let's go ahead and solo this. The kick here, and this hit, and that bass drum there. And this is going to add another, it's going to add more bottom end, but this other bass drum here too is going to play off the upbeat to give more swing and bounce. So let's listen to the two of them together. So that fills up the bottom end really nicely. Gives a lot more punch down there. But then that other kick drum that's happening right here, as you can see, and what we'll do is we'll just hold shift so we can see both of the patterns here. This is a cool feature now in Ableton Live 10. So that extra kick pattern that we have here is really helping just create another little just like almost like another hit to just introduce the next phrase or the next turnaround of that bar. And this kick pattern here is also lined up with this hit over here. So since this is the bottom kick, I don't I don't mind these being a little bit on the grid. This one's just slightly off because the most of the swing is coming from the top drum here. And then we have another drum kit down here, and this is just another element stacked on top of that. And now the three of them make up the drum groove. Now here's a nice little rim knock, right? Like a nice little percussive hit. And you can see that it's clearly way off the grid. And that's so that the clap or the hit or the rim knock on the snare, whatever it is I'm using, that's in the first brown clip here. Let's see if we can combine these two. And hold these here. There you go. So we have them here. So the brown notes. And let's look at the latest one. So it's slightly off for the simple fact that when the snare hits from here, you can see here, this one's a lot more ahead, and this one's just a little bit behind. And so you've got that nice little delayed reaction, and that's a really good trick to add some swag and that bounce and that vibe to the groove. And then what we have is a crash just to announce the beginning of every turnaround. So every 4 bars. So there you go. And so that drum groove is really, at the very core, is taking advantage of not being perfectly aligned. And I know sometimes it's hard to really grasp that, but that's what adds the human element. So try quantizing at a lower percentage, whichever DAW that you're using, but not being so strict with the placement. And you can go manually and slide things, nudge things a little bit. It will take a little bit of time. Now, the cool thing is the first initial idea was from this main drum beat. And I didn't want to lose that vibe. And that was created, I played it. I did the 39% quantize, and then I just quickly found another drum kit, played the second one here, and that just got the ball rolling. So that's the drum groove. Now let's head over to the bass line. Now once I had the groove and the drums in place, I fired up my Novation bass station that I have here in the studio. So it's just an external mono synthesizer, and I just started browsing through some patches and started creating a riff. As a matter of fact, I was trying to record it. And I always kind of have a mic in the room recording at all the times in case I'm playing something. I was like, oh, that was really cool. What did I did? And here's the recording. Just trying to figure out the bass. So I started tinkering around with a patch and the overall groove and timing. And this is the riff that we have. Now, I didn't quantize this, nor did I even record MIDI for this. I wanted to have, once again, that human element, that looseness to it. So I just hit the record button and started recording a bunch of takes and recorded it directly live into Ableton Live. So it was more of like a performance, and that was the reoccurring theme here. It's like loose swag and feel. That's what I'm going for. So I wanted to record the bass that way to really capture that. And you can see that the bass doesn't line up here with the grid as well. So we've got a lot of that happening. Now, like I said, how far is too far? Like how long, when would you know? Well, if it starts to go a little bit off time, then I can always just warp and move things and snap them and a little bit so that they feel good. But basically you want to go to where you actually feel where it feels right. So let me go ahead and play this with the drums that we've created and see the pocket that they create together. So this note here, that little glide up, and so what I did was I turned the glide or the portamento on my keyboard on the Novation bass station up so that it would accentuate that glide, that thing that's going on, and that was a real key element there. And so that's the verse riff here. And just that pocket alone with the drums and the bass, we started already coming up with some verse ideas and just melodic ideas. And I knew that this was going to be a really good vibe, and I didn't want to add a lot of instrumentation here to the verse. I just wanted to keep it subtle, because that bass, I wanted to just be right there in front with the drums.
Headlights bouncing off the floor. Slow down, we've been here before.
So having the bass that's sparse and the drum pocket the way it is gives some nice open room and space for the vocal to really just shine through with that with the rhythmic phrasing.
Headlights.
So we've got like headlights in this nice gap where the bass is at here. So the bass hits, we've got room, and that's where the vocal kind of creeps in to do his thing. And it felt good, so I liked it, and we just kept moving from there. We were both vibing with this melody.
Headlights bouncing off the floor. Slow down, we've been here before.
Now, in the pre, I go ahead, we still have the same bass line. I start to open up the filter a little bit more so we get more of that top end. I'm just using a little bit of compression just to make sure that I have a nice overall balance, and just some EQing so that it's in the context, fits well in the balance of the mix. Now for the chorus, I open it up just a little bit, but change the pattern. And then we go to a change right here. So all that's going on there is just me kind of just messing around with the filter knob, opening it up, and it adds a really nice life to it. So when we get back into hear the chorus, split the drum side. So I changed the rhythm and the pattern just to add some more variation. And definitely opening up the filter gave some new characteristics about the bass line that help it stood out, so that when we got into the chorus section. And that's really important to me, that I'm building dynamics, that when we get to this section, adding little variations to the bass line could help really add this nuance and make it extra special when we get to that chorus section. And once we have the bass in place, hey, that rhymes, I start adding some more musical elements in there to fill up the chorus section. So let's go into that now. Now, along with the main bass line riff that we have here, I actually layered it with another bass line to add more low end and sub. But I'm also doing a pitch bend here in this note. And what it does, it gives this illusion that the main bass riff is doing it too, but it's really coming from the low end. So take a listen. Got that nice little drop right here. And I'm not actually playing these notes because I'll let this bass line, the top one, just kind of accent that. And so, or just have that, and I want to accent each of the notes on the downbeat with the sub. And there's that pitch bend again. So what I'm doing is going into the envelope mode here in my clip. I'm literally just recording my pitch bending that I'm doing on my pitch bend wheel on my MIDI controller. And as you can see here, let me just open this up. It's not automated. It's in the sense that I'm not drawing it in. So what I'm really capturing here in this whole project is the human element, right? I'm not really doing a lot of like perfect, writing in and the automation. As you can see, this is not a straight line. All the other pitch bends are different. They're not similar. And so I really wanted the human element to be all over this project. So I didn't bother drawing in the automation so that it would be a perfect pitch bend. And that's what was happening. And so the sub is just doing that nice little dive there. And that's a really cool effect. And it just feels like that the note is doing that from the original bass line. And then I go ahead and layer it with another patch playing the same exact note here. The same thing with the pitch bend and everything. And this is coming from a synthesizer called Rapture Pro. This is like made by Cakewalk. With a little bit of overdrive. And getting rid of that low end so the sub can have its home there. So the one in the middle will be the sub, and that's where the low end comes from. And then the Rapture is just kind of adding some more of that distorted grit to it. After that, I go ahead and now use some synths to add some stabs, and these are gonna really accent those down notes. So here we have a synth here, and I believe I used the Lush. It's Lush SH101 by Sugar Bites. But what I did was I basically recorded the audio, and the way you can do that is to simply, you can right click on a track and hit freeze. And what it's going to do is it's really freezing. It's locking in all the effects, everything from the synthesizer, the patch you're using, the insert plugins such as the overdrive, the EQ, and it's literally going to just kind of lock all that in place, free up any CPU that you might be using to process that. And if I wanted to, I can simply hit flatten or drag and drop this to an audio track. So I'll hit flatten, and it's going to convert that MIDI into audio, and I can visually see what's going on here. So I did that process with one of the synth patches. So you can see I played it all the way through. So now the problem with having that note linger for too long is that it changes the vibe. So by having it short and changing it as audio, I was able to do these nice little cuts like this. And it gives a nice swell, and it ends right there. And I like the drama that it adds. So layering it and doing the same thing with my Juno synthesizer I have here in the studio. I made these just a little bit longer so that it'll just feel like the Juno chords here have more of that airy bite, and then this is just like has like just a little tail to it. So I kind of like the way it felt. And then same thing, another pad here doing the same exact thing. So let's just solo that third one. And so having them as audio was just really cool, because when you chop them up, what's different than MIDI is that it feels different, and it gives that nice urgency to it. So let's play it right here. So that's what we're doing here, and these synths really help just accent those notes, giving the vocals some time to to perform between them, and it really lets the vocal melody stand out with that. Now, some of the other elements that are in the chorus are some rhythmic elements that I've recorded from the Juno once again, just doing a nice little blip. And you can see here, this is clearly not quantized. This is just more for feel, but this really gets accented over here in the pre-chorus. So what I'm doing is just to build dynamically. We have the verses here, just drum and bass, and then we start to build by having this present and some of the chords, but the chords will be filtered here.
You tell me that you need me, you need to know.
So here, I've even done some warping to some of these blips so that they can purposely be ahead of the beat, or just nudging it so that it adds some more of that swag and that feel and that vibe. And remember, that's at the heart of what the song is about. It's that human element. And then we have the chords here filtered, and these aren't chopped so that they're not feeling the reason why I didn't chop these is because I wanted them to feel a little bit more lush, or more legato, really. More soft. And then we add a couple little these little nuances, this guy over here yelling, hey, I think this is actually me. Yeah, it's just saying hey or hey sample. And what we're doing here is I'm using that and I'm running it, I'm sending it all the way to that C, the return track, which had that delay that we were using on the drums. And this is without it. So cranking that all the way gives a nice little wide touch to it. And I'm just accenting that section. And so the way I like deciding on where to put that rhythmically, I had, before I even had it in the project, I was actually saying it in the room. So I was, hey, you know, so I was, hey, and that's what I was doing. So I was like, you know, let me either record it or find a cool sample and place it there.
You tell me that you need me.
And so that's also going on in the choruses too.
Breaks my heart to love, even when you're not.
Now, when you look at the overall chorus, there really isn't much going on. And sometimes it just leaves me like, well, that's impossible. I can't just have that much stuff there. I've got to add more. But as I started to add more elements, it really started to take away from the chorus. It actually started to drag it down and slow it down overall. So this was the initial pocket. And after kind of finding out what I should add or things like that, we just tracked the vocals, and then we just knew what we had was great and felt good. So I didn't bother adding any more stuff to it because it really just felt right. And that's kind of the nature how I navigate towards deciding what more to add or what should I take away. I do that. I either shave away or add until me or the artist, we just feel like, wow, the overall core of what we're trying to do is there. And I felt that with just having the chorus that we have here with the vocals and the elements we have there in place. In the last chorus, I'm introducing a new element here, and those are some pads that I have side chained to the kick drum. Just some reverb here, just a little bit of that, and the kick drum is side chaining. What that means is every time the kick drum plays, it's triggering the compressor to allow the pad to duck out of the way. So it just adds a more rhythmic touch to it. That's the reason behind me doing it. I'm not doing it so that for a mix purpose. I just wanted that pad to kind of duck and have more rhythm to it. And so having that pad there, and the reason why I'm not chopping it up is because the last chorus, I would add just a new element to brighten things up a little bit, and having that sustained note kind of helps feel like it just adds more grandiose to it.
Breaks my heart to love, even when you're not.
And see, by the time we reach the last chorus, we've already heard the chorus twice without that element. So by the time we get here, it really doesn't drag it down as much, and it does feel new. I'm also incorporating some tambourines just to kind of liven it up a little bit as well.
Breaks my heart to got more than enough.
So what I'll do is I'll just bring the pads down just a little bit. I just want them in the background to feel like there's some, a little bit of glimmer and some shine there for that last chorus. And then we have a bridge section with some pads.
Falling down, I'm not on solid ground without you.
And so this is really the only section in the song where we're hearing sustained chords, notes being held out, and the melody itself is actually more legato as well.
Falling down, I'm not on solid ground without you, without you. And if you call me out of all this hurt and doubt I caused you, let me tell you, make me wanna be your.
And so long pads here in the bridge, and I like having that contrast. Held out notes, long pads, nice little breakdown, no drums going on, and then we go right back into that nice chopped up groove that we've created. And so that's a really cool contrast from the bridge section to the chorus, and it really just brings more life to the chorus. So the bigger the difference here, the more accented the chorus will be. So let's go ahead and talk about the vocals. So we start over here with the verse melody.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
And we don't have any doubling going on until we get to the pre-chorus. And the pre-chorus starts to incorporate a double, which is really just three other tracks.
So where do we go? You tell me that you need me, you need to know.
But what we're doing is just accenting certain sections. We're not really doubling the whole thing. And this method is really cool because it helps other sections stand out more than the other. So since we're still very sparse, same thing, added just maybe 2 other elements in the pre, that's okay. We don't need the full-on vocal stacking going on.
You tell me that you need me, you need to know. 'Cause girl, it's so deceiving the way that we flow through time with your hand in mine. I can sum it up in a minute, and if I need to, expect me when I be your.
So right here, what I have is a low vocal. It's basically just an octave. So here's the lead.
Expect me when I be your.
And then what I have is just duplicating and literally holding down the Option key and dragging that down to another track below it and just pitching this down. Now in Ableton Live, you need to have the track warped. The audio needs to be warped. And you want to switch from the mode of beats over to Complex, not Complex Pro. Because when you switch over to Complex Pro and you pitch shift, just sounds like he's trying to, swallow a chimpanzee's arm. I don't know. I don't even know where that came from. But in reality, what it's doing is it's trying its best to keep the integrity of the timbre of that voice. So Complex will allow you just to literally just pitch shift. And that's cool. Having the low octave there just added some cool drama right before going into the chorus. Now, as far as the processing goes for the lead vocal, I have a lead vocal bus here. And that bus means that everything is, well, think of a bus, like literally a bus, where everybody's riding in to get to somewhere, right? So the way I have this set up is that I create audio tracks and I make them buses so that I have my actual lead track here, my lead vocal. I'm sorry, right here. So here's the verse vocal right here. So here's the actual take that I recorded the vocal on. But then I route the output. I said instead of going to the master output, I chose to use the lead vocal bus. And you can do the same thing with grouping. This has just been a personal workflow of mine. And one of the biggest reasons I do that is so that I can visually see the vocals here. And I can control, the backgrounds. I can have the background vocal bus right next to the lead vocal bus and the harmony bus too. The thing is, when I start to group them, and what I mean by that is that if I group them like this, and I create groups, I would have to move the group next to each other, and that can also affect the arrangement too, like how I visually see the vocals. So that's another reason why I do that. But so here on the vocal bus, we have a gate to take out any unwanted noise, a virtual console control to emulate that analog warmth again, and then we're using a Fab Filter EQ. And the way I like to set this up in vocal processing is you got restore, balance, enhance, right? You've got these 3 little sections. So restore or repair, meaning, take out or just craft and mold the vocal with an EQ to take out anything that can get in the way, any muddiness or any problematic frequencies. So
bouncing off the floor.
I used to be like a stickler for like, low cut, which means just take all the low ends from like 90 and below. But the more I started getting deeper into crafting and getting my vocals to sound the way I wanted them to, I realized that I needed to go a little bit higher than that. So I just use this mode here to just kind of see where it is I want to take away, and that would be right around here.
We've been here before.
So I'm using this first EQ to really just take out any problematic frequencies, boost a little bit of the high end there.
Headlights.
And then I have another EQ after that. made by Isotope, the Neutron. Really cool EQ. And I'm using this more of a dynamic. So I put dynamic mode here. So it's like a dynamic EQ. So this only reduces when that frequency, is being played, and it really just adds dynamics to it in the sense that it's pulling down that frequency depending on the threshold for that specific range.
We've been here before.
So this is without the EQ.
Headlights bouncing off the floor. Slow down. We've been here before.
So once I got the frequencies pretty much set where I like them, and then I use a compressor here to just create balance. So repair, balance. This is where the balance section comes in. And this is just keeping an overall dynamic balance so I have a consistent performance.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
And then I'm using a Eosis de-esser.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
And this is just taking away a lot of that sibilance and the that's happening a lot in the high end. So 2 forms of compression, because that's compressing the high end to take away all that. And then this is more to add flavor and processing. I'm using a Kramer tape plugin because I actually don't. It's not just for the tape emulation, but really for the slapback. I love the tape slapback that's on here.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
So just a little.
Slow down. We've been here before.
So a nice little slapback delay on that, and then just some waves tuned to make sure that the tuning's on point.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
And then we're doing the sending again. So I'm sending, let's see what F is over here. F. And what I typically do is I like to color the return tracks that I'm using for my lead vocal a specific color, usually white. And then so F is a doubler, and that's going to give me some nice stereo width with the vocal. I use the waves doubler here.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
I'm using the basic doubler patch.
Slow down. We've been here before.
So this is without it.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
Now this is with it.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
Since I have some slapback delay on the actual vocal track itself, I just gave it a little bit of some room, a tight roomed reverb. I didn't want a lot of reverb because here's what happens when you put like a concert hall reverb on a vocal like this. More importantly, on a vibe like this.
Headlights bouncing off the floor.
It just sends them far in the back. I wanted it dry and up front. I really wanted it to be kind of punchy. And so adding some hall on that would really just add some some tail, and it would just kind of drag it down. So for D, I have a really tight room. I'm using the Verb Suite Classics from Slate, and it's just a really small room. So I'll just solo the reverb. It's almost like a bathroom type of thing. And that's kind of what I'm adding here.
Headlights bouncing off the floor. Slow down. We've been here before.
So that's the treatment that I have on that vocal, which really just kind of gives the right attitude and the character that I'm trying to get with the vocal for the specific track. And then once we get into the chorus,
Ooh, 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 breaks my heart to love, even when you're down.
I'm just having a similar process happen with the background vocals and the harmonies here. And I'm really now just kind of creating a balance. We have the oohs over here. Got about 4 stacks of those. So I've got 4 oohs going on. And then we have about 3 of the lead response. And then we have 2 harmony tracks. So so basically two doubles. Well, not 2 doubles. It would be 2 tracks of harmony. And then we have our lead, our chorus lead. And then we have the chorus doubles. So this is the basically the double of that chorus.
It breaks my heart to love. It breaks my heart to love.
Now you can hear more reverb and delay on the chorus and the background vocals, and that's something I like to do. I like to send the background vocals a little bit farther back, so I might have a little bit more delay or more reverb, and it just creates a nice balance from my background vocals and the lead.
It breaks my heart to love, even when you're not. You got more than enough. Now I'm running out.
And then when we get to the bridge section, I'm just automating, doing some automation with that verse vocal, and that's this. So I have here, let's see, G is just a basic reverb from Ableton Live, stock reverb, and I'm using that just for the sole purpose of adding some, some ambience and some more drama, and just make it sound airy. Sorry, dreamy. That's what I was looking for. I wanted it to sound more dreamy, so that's what I'm using that reverb, but just for that section. So that's why I'm automating this. So I click this section here, and I just boosted that so I can send a lot of my lead vocal to the reverb. Having that reverb dry in that section, it's okay, but this adds more. This adds more character, and that actually feels like, oh wow, this dreamy little transition from this crazy groove that we were just in. So you can see there really isn't a lot going on in this song. We've created a good pocket and a good groove by not quantizing fully 100% and leaving some room for that human element to bring life and overall swag and vibe to the track, and then really just gave space for the vocals to do their thing. So I hope this was helpful for you. I'll see you in the next breakdown video.